Picture this, a Sindh village in 2025. The summer heat presses down like a weight, heavy and suffocating. You see fields of sugarcane stretching to the horizon, but the workers bent over in those fields don't own them. Their hands are blistered, their feet are bare, their backs bent in debt that will outlive them. At the center of the village is a haveli, thick whitewashed walls, high gates, guards with rifles perched like vultures. Inside lives the landlord. When a dispute arises over water, wages, marriage, people don't go to the police or the courts. They come here. They sit cross-legged on the ground, waiting for the Wadera to emerge. And he does. Mustache-oiled, dressed in crisp white shalwar kameez, a Sindhi topi balanced on his head. He doesn't shout. He doesn't need to. A flick of his hand decides a man's fate, punished or spared. Justice or mercy. A canal will be opened or closed. A woman will be married off or killed for so-called honor. This isn't the 1800s. This is Pakistan right now. Salam doston. Welcome back to Armpit Intellectuals. I'm Zara.
And I am Bilal. Today we are pulling back the curtain on the feudal order in Pakistan. The Waderas, jagirdars, landlords, sardars. The dynasties that didn't just survive colonialism, but thrived under it. Then transformed that privilege into multi-generational domination.
Because let's be clear, Waderas aren't just cultural flavor, like the mustached uncle in a Land Cruiser we joke about on Twitter. They are the architecture of our politics. They're why democracy feels hollow, why bonded labor still chains families, and why so many of our tragedies, from Mukhtara Mai to karo-kari killings, keep playing on loop.
The word Wadera literally means big man in Sindhi. And that's exactly what the role is. A performance of largeness, of being bigger than the village. Bigger than the law, bigger than life itself. The Wadera is supposed to be untouchable, indispensable, the gravitational center around which everything else orbits. He isn't just someone who owns land in the way we might think of a landowner elsewhere. He owns vast tracts, sometimes tens of thousands of acres. So much land that the whole community live their entire lives inside his domain. And in a country where land isn't just property, but the foundation of survival, food in your stomach, water for your crops, shelter for your family, even dignity, controlling land means controlling people. For peasants, the Wadera is not just a landlord who collects rent at the end of the month. He's life and death rolled into one figure. You need water for your crops, he's the one who decides when the canal gates open or close. You want protection from harassment, or to settle a dispute, the police don't act until he makes the call. You need a loan for your daughter's dowry or your father's medical treatment, you show up at his door, cap in hand. You need a job for your son, you ask him. Even something as intimate as who you can marry is subject to his permission. He doesn't just represent the state in his village, he is the state. His haveli is the courthouse, the police station, the welfare office, and the parliament all rolled into one.
And crucially, this isn't earned power. It's not like he hustled his way up or built a business from scratch. It's hereditary, passed down like an heirloom. If your father was a Wadera, you'll inherit the title, the acres, and the tenants. If your grandfather was a tribal chief, that role drops straight into your lap without you lifting a finger. That's why Pakistani politics is dynastic at its core. Look at our parliaments, decade after decade. Bhuttos, Khars, Legharis, Buktis, Mazaris. The same surnames repeat endlessly, as though politics is not a matter of service or vision, but of family property. It's monarchy without the crown, entitled bloodlines wrapped in the theater of democracy. And this is what makes the system feel so immovable. Because the Wadera isn't just an individual, he's an institution, a dynasty, a living reminder that in Pakistan, power doesn't flow upwards from the people. It trickles down surnames. Even when parties change, when uniforms change, the bloodlines remain. Understanding Wadera isn't about a dictionary definition. It's about seeing how one big man comes to stand in for an entire nation's politics. Before we argue about culture, let's remember who rewired it. This isn't timeless tradition. It was engineered. The British didn't stumble upon a natural feudal order in Sindh or Punjab and leave it intact. They supercharged it. Governing millions directly was impossible, so they outsourced control. They created loyal intermediaries who could keep villages docile on their behalf. And how do you manufacture loyalty? With property. They handed out jagirdars, massive land grants, to men who promised allegiance to the Raj. These weren't cultural blessings or acts of generosity, they were contracts. In return for loyalty, intermediaries received rifles, ceremonial titles, and most importantly, legal impunity. The Raj got steady revenue, order, and the appearance of local legitimacy. Peasants got trapped in a new layer of bondage.
And the smoothness with which this carried over into independence is the real tragedy. After 1947, Pakistan had the opportunity to break the feudal spine, to dismantle the colonial scaffolding and attempt redistribution. India, for all its flaws, tried land reforms in many provinces. Pakistan didn't. The same families who had been subcontractors for the empire simply became rulers of the new nation. They traded one flag for another, swapped out the Union Jack for the crescent and star. But the hierarchy beneath it remained untouched. What looked like independence was, for the peasant, continuity. The taxes no longer went to London, but the structure of servitude stayed intact. The man who had once stood guard for the colonizer now sat in parliament as representatives of the free nation.
And colonialism didn't just preserve feudalism. It restructured it to be even more extractive. Traditional forms of communal land or shared water were weakened. Customary checks on elite power were undermined. What remained was a cleaner chain of command. Peasant at the bottom, landlord in the middle, empire at the top. That vertical order didn't dissolve with 1947. It calcified. So when people romanticize feudalism as our heritage, we have to remember much of what we call tradition was an imperial experiment in social control.
Yes, exactly. And independence gave peasants new flags, new anthems, even new maps. But not new freedoms. The families smiling beside British officers in old photographs were the same ones swearing oaths and ministers in new assemblies. So much of Pakistan's politics still feels colonial because the structure of domination never really left. It's like, गोरे चले गए अपने कुत्ते पीछे छोड़ गए. You could argue Pakistan itself was in part a project of Waderas. In Sindh, elite landlords were among the earliest to support partition. Not necessarily out of idealism about Muslim self-determination, but out of fear that Nehru's India would bring reforms that cut into their acres. Pakistan became insurance, a state for Muslims and very usefully for Muslim elites. Take the Bhuttos. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto styled himself as the voice of the people. Roti Kapda Makan. But the Bhuttos were and are one of Sindh's largest landlord families. Their power didn't come from Karachi's factories or unions. It came from peasants in Larkana who couldn't risk voting against them.
And those 1970s land reforms, on paper, they were radical. In practice, absolutely gutted. Landlords transferred property to cousins, wives, children. Under Zia, courts later deemed land reforms un-Islamic. The project died. Punjab had its dynasties too. Khars, Doltanas, Dewanas. Mustafa Khar, the so-called Lion of Punjab, strutted with feudal arrogance, and Tehmina Durrani's My Feudal Landlord shattered the facade, exposing intimate violence that mirrored the public politics of domination.
In Balochistan, Nawab Akbar Bugti embodied the fusion. Tribal chief and provincial governor rolled into one. The state outsourced authority to him. He reinforced the state in return. That's feudalism's genius. The way it fuses with the state until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. And in South Punjab, the Lagaris and Mazaris dominated. Even President Farooq Lagari, supposed head of state, was first and foremost a tribal chief, the symbolic father of the nation and a feudal overlord. That contradiction is Pakistan in a single image.
Feudalism isn't just politics, it's the social order. If you want a job in Karachi, you need the landlord's reference letter. A tenant's son can't just apply on merit. The employer asks, "Whose boy are you?" If your canal water is blocked, you don't call a board. You queue at the landlord's gate because he decides whether you'll eat this year. Even the police often won't write a complaint without his nod. Every part of life runs through him like electricity through a grid. That's why voting isn't ideological, it's survival. You vote for the man who controls your access to food, water, and safety because voting otherwise feels like risking everything.
That's why entire villages move like a school of fish. It's not individuals casting ballots freely, it's blocks of families voting how the Wadera instructs. When he switches from PPP to PMLN or PTI, the constituency follows. Not democracy, it's choreography. One cycle, he's wearing green, the next, a tiger, later, the bat. Parties quote electables because in Pakistan, electable means feudal. Someone who can deliver thousands of votes by ownership, not persuasion.
Within that culture, women sit on the sharpest edge. Cousin marriages aren't just tradition. They're mechanisms to keep land in the clan, to tighten the circle so property doesn't leak. Love marriages are treated as rebellion because female desire threatens inheritance math. That's why karo-kari persists. Women murdered for autonomy, their bodies turned into collateral to preserve clan honor. In a feudal system, women are bargaining chips, dowries, pawns in land negotiations, used to cement alliances, resolve disputes, sustain the myth of purity. It's not patriarchy in the abstract, it's patriarchy as property law.
For those who benefit, control doesn't feel like cruelty. It feels like order. The way it's always been. But for everyone below, it's a cage that seeps into every layer of life. Who marries whom, who eats what, who dares to dream of leaving. Feudalism is culture because it rewires communities to treat hierarchy as natural and domination as the price of survival.
So let's ground this in real tragedies. Mukhtara Mai, 2002. Ordered to be gang raped by a village council as punishment for her brother's alleged dishonor. Not random, not village culture. This is feudal patriarchy disciplining through spectacle, through public humiliation, and violence against women.
Karo-kari killings in Sindh. Women executed by families for loving the wrong man, often with tacit sanction from local power holders. Desire becomes rebellion, and rebellion must be crushed. Shahzib Khan's murder, 2012, Karachi. A 20-year-old gunned down for defending his sister from harassment. The accused, Sharak Jatoi, heir to a landlord-industrialist clan. What followed was feudal swagger in an urban metropolis. VIP treatment, legal zigzags, pressure for compromise. The message: the swagger doesn't stop at the farm gate. It cruises city boulevards.
Nazim Jokyo, 2021. He filmed VIPs allegedly hunting endangered Hobara bustards. He was detained and killed. Among the accused, a sitting provincial lawmaker and member of the National Assembly from a powerful clan. And his name was Jam Abdul Karim Bijar. The script is familiar. Political office fused with landlord clout and violence at the junction.
And bonded labor, entire families and kins and fields trapped in debt bondage for generations. Children born into servitude, documented repeatedly by rights groups and journalists. Modern slavery by another name. In truth, it's feudalism at its purest. People tied to land, unable to leave.
Feudalism doesn't only exploit people, it exploits land. Control of irrigation canals, timing of flows in droughts, private embankments in floods. The Wadera's hand is on the river's throat.
During the 2022 floods, multiple reports and testimonies alleged that embankments and diversions shielded states while nearby villages were inundated. Nature bent to protect assets. While millions were displaced, elite properties stood dry. Buffaloes safe, storerooms stocked.
And crop choices matter. Sugarcane and cotton, two crops that are water hungry and profit friendly, these dominate. Food insecurity deepens while aquifers drain. Climate collapse in Pakistan isn't a neutral act of God. Much of it reads like a ledger of extraction and land exploitation. Let me pause on a symbol. In Sindh's Sanghar district, an 8-month-old camel, later nicknamed Cammy, had her front leg chopped off after straying into fields for fodder. Okay, this poor camel was hungry. And the video of her bleeding and crying ricocheted. It echoed across social media. She was rescued to Karachi and fitted with a prosthetic leg. A small miracle against a backdrop of cruelty. If you want a single image of feudal entitlement, backed by impunity, it's this. Punishing a harmless, vulnerable creature. A hungry, vulnerable, harmless creature for trespassing into the violent fiction of ownership and property. Not a mistake, a performance of dominance.
Why don't peasants revolt? The answer isn't only fear of violence, though that's real. It's belief. For generations, people have been told that the landlord is protector. Without him, rival clans will swallow you. Without him, the distant, predatory state will crush you. It's the logic of dependence. Yes, he's cruel. But he's our cruel man. In a place with no reliable justice system, no welfare state, and no neutral police, clinging to the devil can feel rational.
That's how hegemony works. Not just chains on the body, chains on the mind. The Wadera doesn't only occupy land, he occupies imagination. Families name sons after landlords to borrow reflected glory. Villages vote for the man who exploits them because betrayal feels suicidal. Children grow up hearing that the landlord gave their family the right to farm, as if survival were a gift, not a right. The cage isn't only in the fields, it's inside people's heads, shaping how they dream, fear, and accept their place.
Gramsci called it cultural hegemony, domination that doesn't need constant force because it's internalized. When peasants defend the landlord at the tea shop, celebrate his ministerial posts like personal victories, argue on his behalf at election time, that's not only exploitation, that's psychology. The Wadera doesn't just own bodies, he owns the conceivable.
Religion adds another layer. Many Waderas insert themselves into the spiritual landscape, sponsoring shrines, patronizing Sufi saints, bankrolling madrasas. Their names are carved into mosque walls, at Urs festivals. They sit on stage like patrons of faith. In rural Sindh, especially, the landlord and the peer often share a family or a face. When the same hand that feeds you also blesses you, loyalty doesn't just feel strategic, it feels holy.
And that fusion sanctifies domination. If your peer and your landlord are the same figure, disobedience isn't just risky, it feels sinful. So even when the landlord extracts labor unfairly or enforces covenant marriages, the language of faith explains it. God's will, the saint's blessing. Patriarchy gets dressed as morality, land ownership as spirituality. Exploitation stops looking like abuse and starts looking like duty.
Where the state fails to convince, faith succeeds. It creates internal policing. The peasant fears not just losing water or crop, but losing divine favor. When you can bind the stomach and the soul, control subsistence and salvation, you build domination that regenerates across generations. Pop culture mirrors all of this, by the way. In old Lollywood, the villain was often the Wadera. Shisha smoking, mooch twirling, dripping with excess. Gold rings, gold watches, what I'm talking about. Caricatured, yes, but not invented. Audiences recognized him, but cinema exaggerated, but did not lie, actually, what he's actually like.
Right. Then came the memes. Wadera Ka Beta went viral because that cocky smirk and slow drawl compressed centuries of entitlement into 30 seconds. People laughed and recognized. Humor became a release valve for rage you can't otherwise express against the untouchable.
And Instagram has globalized feudal chic. Land Cruiser selfies, Gucci shawls, Dubai coffee shots, Dubai chocolate. I'm just adding that in. Rifles by prize camels. Entitlement rebrands as lifestyle content. The captions are in English now. The filter is I don't know what. But the subtext is the same. Born to own. The social media didn't democratize status. It gave the feudal stage better lighting. And here's the depressing truth, by the way. In 2025, little has changed. Sindh is still PPP land, ruled like a personal estate by the Bhuttos and now the Zardaris. The brand draped in the romance of sacrifice, the power anchored in acres. Punjab remains shaped by landlord dynasties who swap party flags while keeping their grip steady. Balochistan is a chessboard of tribal chiefs in suits presiding over some of the country's poorest districts. Even PTI, the self-styled anti-status quo party, relied on electables to stitch majorities. In Pakistan, electable is code for feudal, a surname that delivers votes by inheritance.
Every attempt at land reform has failed. And it's not mysterious why. Lawmakers are landowners. Expecting them to dismantle their privilege is like asking billionaires to draft a wealth tax that empties their own accounts. Bhutto era reforms were riddled with loopholes. Under Zia, courts later deemed reforms un-Islamic. Since then, governments have quietly shelved even the conversation. In parliament, land reform is a non-starter, not because it's impossible, but because too many votes would be against self-interest. Foxes guard the hen house, then call it democracy.
So peasants remain peasants, landlords remain kings, democracy remains theatre. The ballot isn't a marketplace of ideas, it's a census of allegiance to surnames, not manifestos. Entire constituencies move from PPP to PMLN to PTI and back again, not because ideology shifted, but because the patron did. Until land ownership is confronted, the revolving door will keep spinning. Same estates, fresh scarves, baby. And it's important to remember, peasants haven't always been silent. They've resisted. The Hari movement in Sindh during the 1930s and 40s was exactly that. A grassroots peasant uprising against feudal landlords. At its heart was Haider Baksh Jatoi, known as the father of Sindhi peasants. He gave up a comfortable government job to dedicate his life to the cause of the Hari, the sharecropper, who lived in permanent debt bondage. Under his leadership, the Sindh Hari Committee organized rallies, published demands, and mobilized peasants to say out loud, "We are not property, we are people."
Jatoi wasn't just a politician, he was a symbol. He stood shoulder to shoulder with farmers in the fields, called for land redistribution, and insisted that justice meant ownership should belong to those who tilled the soil, not those who inherited it. The committee's rallies in the 1940s drew tens of thousands, demanding an end to forced labor, fairer crop shares, and relief from crippling debts. It terrified the landlords because for the first time, peasants were speaking in one voice. I just want to add though, the name. Well, it's interesting that the same last name, Shahrukh Jatoi and then Haider Baksh Jatoi. So maybe it's not about just the name, it's more about who is the Wadera of. Because a Bugti can either be like Akbar Bugti, this is a Sardar, or he can be like someone who got displaced by the floods in 2010. So,
yeah, what's in a name, right?
so
And so many moments of resistance in Pakistan's history, just to go back to the Hari movement, it was eventually weakened, of course. It was crushed by state indifference, infiltrated by landlord interests, and fragmented over time. By the 1950s, his power waned, but his legacy did not disappear. And every protest since, from bonded laborers escaping brick kilns, to women marching against honor killings, to farmers blocking highways for fair prices, carries an echo of Jatoi's defiance. The Haider Baksh Jatoi, not Shah.
And that's the point. Peasants did rise. They have resisted. They continue to resist, even if it doesn't always make headlines. The tragedy is not that there's been no rebellion. The tragedy is that each rebellion has been met with the same wall of power. Landlords with rifles, courts with loopholes, and a state too invested in preserving its rural elites. But the fact that resistance keeps appearing from Jatoi's time to today is also the glimmer of hope. It shows that feudalism, no matter how ancient it feels, is not natural. It's contested, it can be challenged, and someday it can be dismantled. Whether you're in Larkana or London, Dera Ghazi Khan or Dubai, the feudal mentality survives. It mutates, adapts, changes outfits, but it doesn't die. In rural Sindh, it's a man in a Haveli deciding fates. In Punjab, it's block voting by surname. In Karachi or Lahore, it's young men flaunting entitlement because their last name is a shield. In the diaspora, it's an uncle treating ancestral acre like a badge of worth. The form changes, the structure persists.
And until we name it, challenge it, dismantle it, we'll stay stuck in its shadow. Bitter truth. Pakistan hasn't even graduated to capitalism. People talk about socialism as the next step, LMAO, but to imagine socialism, a society has to go through capitalism, watch it fail, then move beyond. Because in the West right now, for example, we're in hyper-capitalism, post-capitalist, you could say, given the cost of living and how much, prices have risen and inflation and all of that. But Pakistan never left feudalism. So we're trapped in a pre-capitalist structure in Pakistan while the world debates post-capitalist futures, right? As what we're observing in the West right now. The landlord's power has outlived kings, colonizers, generals, even multiple constitutions. And things feel broken because, well, they are.
The memes are funny. The TikToks of spoiled Wadera ke bete with sunglasses and jeeps make us laugh. But behind the punchlines, women murdered for honor, peasants trapped in debt, journalists punished for filming a hunt. We scroll and share. But for millions, this isn't content. It's daily life.
And that's why we keep saying it over and over. Theory isn't neutral, it's personal. And in Pakistan, in its diaspora, it's usually feudal. Yes, including the diaspora. Naming it doesn't magically dismantle it, but naming it keeps the wound visible. Naming it stops us from pretending this is just culture or tradition. Until we call it what it is, we'll keep confusing domination with normal life. And maybe, just maybe, by saying it out loud, by laughing at it, exposing it, we chip away at its power. And maybe the real closing image is this: a Haveli wall, the same one we pictured at the start. But now, it isn't just villagers sitting outside waiting for judgment, it's also cracks in the plaster, banners waved in protest, graffiti scrawled by young hands, Hari Zinda Hai. The Haveli still looms, but the writing on its walls tells us it won't stand forever.